Good morning. Welcome to today's broadcast, Tea with Davina. What don't we know? Talking about unions, Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump, talking about the ability of government to be a buffer between people and the predatory nature of wealthy people, the subset of wealthy people who have got locked into pursuit of profit against the interests of communities, families, and societies at large. So that's our topics for today. I thought we'd start. I know it lifted my spirits this morning. Listen to Lara Trump be a horrendous performing artist, because to do this broadcast, I have to psych myself up. I have to have the confidence, and I work on myself by saying the moment is urgent. I remember Kamala Harris talking to some students, sorry, I should say Vice President Kamala Harris, talking to some students who asked her for public speaking tips, and they said, what are your tips? And she said, imagine you're on the Titanic and you have to tell the people to evacuate, to get into the lifeboats. So make it less about you and more about the need for your message to be heard. And so I try and focus on that. But here we have Lara Trump singing a little bit just to make us all see that
without your bravery, we're all out of luck. No, this can't be denied. You gotta be special.
Then why not people who actually want the best for other people and not just to line their own pockets?
Put your last in everybody first.
So
without your bravery, we're all
play acting there at revering first responders, and I'm guessing that her coterie, her entourage, and considering she's the she's the chairperson of the RNC, the co-chairperson, that they've said to her, you need to be a foil, you need to put something out there to counterbalance the information that gets circulated about Trump calling service members suckers and losers. Now, this was confirmed by Trump's chief of staff, former chief of staff, John Kelly, also a retired general, who confirmed that, yes, Trump disparaged service members as losers, and it shouldn't be that difficult for people to accept he did that, because Trump publicly disparaged John McCain, who was a prisoner of war, who forfeited the right to leave his prisoner of war camp early because he was the son of somebody high up in the army chain. What was he? Not son of a general, son of the something. And John McCain was like, no, I'll go when everybody else gets released as well. So he was a hero in that he voluntarily took on extra time. And Trump publicly said, I like my heroes to not be captured. And that's the kind of important data point that erodes Trump's support with independents and people who've retained a modicum of evidence processing skills, which is really important because there's a kind of normalcy bias, a kind of white dominance pandering that allows people in the media and allows an overly large portion of the audience to ignore Trump's moral and ethical failings, repeatedly publicly demonstrated moral and ethical failings, let alone his conviction for fraud, but also his settlement for fraudulent behavior with the Trump University students. He settled for $25 million, despite claiming that he would never settle prior to his election in 2016. Now, how can so many people just ignore Trump's fraud? Because Trump positions himself as the savior of white dominance. A lot of people, whether they realize it or not, have a fear of being in a minority. They fear demographic changes coming to pass so that they are a minority, a white minority in a diverse, pluralistic society. Why would they fear that? Because when white people were the majority, they often treated and continue to treat people of minority background as if they're useful stepping stones to enrich and benefit themselves. It's not the greatest, but it is what it is. Let me get Lara Trump off our screen. We've got so much to talk about today. What don't we know? So let's see. That was Lara Trump's music video, yes. We listened to a clip of it. The good news is that Jamie Harrison, the chair of the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, has announced this morning that they're updating some money transfers to ensure that they win Senate, House, gubernatorial, Attorney General, and state legislative races down the ballot. Because sometimes people who vote Democrat have a tendency to just vote for the candidate they know at the top of the ticket, the most high-profile candidate, and they think it's not important to vote Democrat down ballot, as opposed to Republican voters who might feel more invested in delivering for the party up and down ballot because they are very invested in an identity level in being ruled by Republicans as much as possible. They have a solid belief that voting for a Republican is helpful for the economy and consequently their own family, which I do have to say this, it's important to highlight it, is in strict contradiction to evidence that 10 out of the last 11 recessions since World War II have commenced under Republican presidents, that Republican presidents talk a lot of talk and have a lot of acquiescence in the media for the narrative they spin, a false narrative of economic responsibility, a false narrative of keeping budgets tight. They don't really keep budgets tight. They cut a lot of tax breaks for the wealthiest. They reduce corporate tax and claim that that's the way to spur economic growth, whereas really it just facilitates a lot more predatory behavior and the deregulations. The deregulatory steps they often take facilitates the slow poisoning of a lot of American people, and ultimately less money in the hands of consumers and workers means less money going into the economy, and hence the very guaranteed contraction of economic activity after a Republican's been in office for a while. And somebody cleverly pointed out on Twitter the other day was a Twitter account by the name of Quondi, Qondi. You should follow her if you don't already. She brings a lot of the joy back to campaigning because she leans into the attractiveness of politicians and how you can generate a lot of buzz around people donating to people they think are attractive inside and out. But her point, which was a solid point, is that there's often a time delay. So if Republicans get in after Democratic presidents, they're often handed good economic conditions that are a result of pro-social policies that help people and help consumers and help workers to be better consumers through better working conditions and better pay. And the time delay means Republicans use these good conditions to pretend that they can take responsibility for it. And then once the fallout from the Republican policies has taken effect, so George Bush tax breaks for the wealthy, a reduction in corporate tax rates, etc., that creates huge deficits because you can't maintain government activity with a reduced budget if you're just shoveling money back into the pockets of your wealthy friends, but you're not increasing input from anywhere else. Then yes, they create the budget deficits, they create working conditions that make people more desperate, more vulnerable to exploitation. And the economy begins to contract. And then the Republicans maybe get held accountable enough, reduces enough Republican voting enthusiasm so that they get voted out of office, and a Democratic candidate is once again handed poor economic conditions to try and turn around. And then once they've done that, people are complacent enough to lean back into white identity voting considerations and vote for Republicans who they feel, who they hear echoes of, we will preserve your safety as a white majority. Nobody's going to threaten you if you have some kind of subtle paranoia happening that if you're no longer the majority, then people will be allowed to do to you what was done to Black minorities historically and enslave you or attack you in some way. Because Black people are still being often economically attacked, educationally attacked, in terms of excluded from opportunity, which is a form of attack to reduce people's access to personal growth, intergenerational wealth, etc. do you know that since the conservative-stacked Supreme Court was able to overturn affirmative action, the numbers of Black students at universities has substantially decreased. Now, the point of affirmative action was to reduce the ongoing impact of there being fewer Black mentors available because of the historic and pervasive exclusion, policy-led exclusion of all Black people from universities, not because of merit, but because of a white superiority rule that was codified openly and officially in the policies of higher education. And unofficially, the fallout of that is fewer people to say, yes, I have the wealth to inherit from my educational gains that are translated into monetary gains, so I can help you pay for college, or I can help use my contacts and my experience to help you write the application, etc. It's supposed to address that imbalance created by the actions of white supremacists in power. And yeah, they've managed to say, no, but we should be colorblind. It's racist to acknowledge the ongoing fallout, the ongoing consequences of racist policies and practices. And we still have racist undervaluation of homes occupied and owned by Black people, which substantially attacks the ability of Black people to build value in their homes, in their assets. And Vice President Kamala Harris started a committee to help address that policy, to help bring laws and regulations to bear on that problem of the ongoing widespread attack on the ability of Black Americans to build wealth through their assets. So let's see, what else have we got for today? So yay, Jamie Harrison, thank you for helping to put value down ballot so that he's helping Kamala not just run to win, but run to govern, because Americans need effective governance, and governance that is hamstrung by having Republican obstructionists in office at any level of government impacts the ability of Democrats to deliver social good. And I'm thinking specifically of Obamacare and the expansion of Medicaid, laws that were passed at a federal level, but Republican state governors were able to refuse to expand Medicaid after falsely describing it as socialism to help provide access to medical insurance, to medical care, preventative medical care to citizens regardless of income level. And so 10 states have refused that expansion of Medicaid. Hundreds of thousands of people will have likely lost their lives unnecessarily in Republican-governed states because of that, because of media complicity as well as Republican obstructionism, media complicity in refusing to call out the harm that is attendant to those policies, the harm that is a corollary to that refusal to expand Medicaid. People that can't access preventative medical care have more expensive problems down the line, as well as the tragedy of unnecessarily early deaths and loss of family life, shared experiences, the kind of fun you can have with someone when they're not succumbing to conditions that were preventable had they been able to access preventative medical care. So here we go. Next is that Trump said on Fox yesterday that he had every right to interfere with the 2020 election. So the quote is, "Whoever heard you get indicted for interfering with a presidential election where you have every right to do it? You get indicted and your poll numbers go up." The Harris campaign says the Harris campaign says it's evidence that Trump believes he's above the law. And of course, it really is evidence that Trump thinks he's above the law. He knows from experience that you can orchestrate a lot of outcomes as long as you control a narrative. So sometimes because of the implied threat of violence. So if Trump's able to tell enough supporters that it's outrageous that he experienced legal consequences, then his followers are quite likely to attack the Capitol, but also to call election officials and harass them. Threats of violence, threats of stalking people's children and harming people's children, etc. These threats do have an impact on outcomes because in many cases it deters people from doing their jobs. And that's what it's there for. That's why he lies so nakedly, so unabashedly to the camera when he's talking, because he's purposely shaping a narrative. People often say it's evidence that he's mentally unwell or mentally incompetent. I'll leave the door open to that interpretation, but under fascism, you shape legal outcomes. You shape election consequences by bending reality to your will with the words you say and how you depict circumstances. So you can say black is blue. You can say night is day. You can say the Presidential Act, the Presidential Records Act stipulates that I be allowed to take home whatever documents I like after my presidential term has finished. It doesn't, it's the opposite of what the Presidential Records Act states, but Trump is endeavoring to shape a reality in his followers' minds to build outrage, to rage bait, to provoke violence. It's a stochastic terrorism methodology that should be talked about more, because it's all well and good to say that Trump's incompetent and prone to babbling and nonsense, but to him, he's weaving topics. He's entertaining in a way to slide in untruths in a context of having made his audience feel comfortable by cracking jokes using a variety of tones and pop culture references to, in the way that an open mic person, a comedian would weave in and out of stories in order to build on a theme, whatever their theme may be. And Donald Trump's theme is blame migrants, fear people invading the country of differing skin color, succumb and lean into your concerns that you may no longer be a dominant white majority. I mean, there's a reason why Trump's rallies do look so uniformly white, and the reason why they have to make so much of any and financially reward any black person willing to lie for them and pretend that their policies help black Americans and help Americans of any color. They have to tell those lies to conceal that, yes, their fundamental drive is pandering to people who fear loss of white dominance. Bob's here. Hello, Bob. And Bob just said, was just at the supermarket and was speaking with an employee, a person of color. He mentioned that Trump may be sentenced to 16 days in prison. But a woman in line behind me really freaked out. So the cashier laughed, but a woman in line behind me really freaked out and yelled at me and said, I'll never vote for Biden. Should have seen the look on her face when I said, you don't have to, because he isn't running for office. Then I chuckled. She was so angry, and Holly and I laughed all the way to the car. Yes, that has been one advantage of the snap change in candidates a few months before an election, is that it pulls the rug under the feet of people who've been brainwashed to think negatively of Joe Biden. That has lost some of its power. But what hasn't lost its power is the resentment, the weaponized grievance and white resentment of Trump supporters who don't believe white people can be happy in America unless they are represented by a white person in office. They're afraid of people pandering to black people. They're afraid of restitution being made or anything changing that would seek to mitigate the harms caused by some of America's past. They prefer to believe that white people are good. They prefer always good. I mean, I don't believe that white people are uniformly not good, but they inhabit a moral universe in which they are the heroes, white people are the heroes, and it conflicts and it hurts them intellectually to have their foundational views challenged, their foundational views that the founding fathers were all heroic, that the Constitution was written perfectly. I mean, not that they they totally support Trump violating the Constitution in his own service, which shows that their loyalty to the Constitution really was loyalty to an understanding that they had with the Constitution in that it would preserve white dominance, the privileges associated with white dominance. I don't feel negatively about a pluralistic, diverse present and future for the United States. It works. It's already working. The part of it that doesn't work is this festering boil of refusal to acknowledge that racism still exists, that efforts to reduce the impact of racism are helpful to lift Americans, that nobody's harmed if more Black students are accepted to university, because opening the door to ethnic groups that were harmed by the willful exclusion of people of color and often Jewish people and people from other countries to learn institutions of higher learning, that was harmful and undermined the meritocratic pursuit of excellence. When you let people in on the basis of merit and make some allowance for the historical impact of whites only inclusion, then you are facilitating greatness. You're facilitating a more community-wide growth, community-wide pursuit of excellence, and the ability of people to go back and give to their communities and be role models and help share the benefits of that higher education and the ancillary higher earning potential of that education. People who undertake professional studies give back to their communities, not only their immediate families, but to their communities and to their society, because having doctors and lawyers and accountants is actually good for a society. Having engineers, having people who've studied enough principles of physics and math and science that they can invent things, studied enough principles of business that they can learn how to generate real value and not just create desperation, and not just, fine people or compel people to hand over their money, which is often a result of Republican policies that create need and then exploit need and exploit desperation, that rent people white goods because they can't pay to purchase a fridge outright and charge exorbitant prices, that basically the loan sharks of the corporate world, except in business. People who want to wind back regulations are more likely to support Trump because they don't believe in the right of people to live without being exploitatively polluted and have to consume air containing enough toxins that increases the likelihood that your children will have asthma and breathing difficulties, or drink water that has less rather than more carcinogens in it, which correlates with not only higher rates of asthma, but cancers and liver cancer and all bodily systems are impacted when deregulated companies are free to pollute your air and water systems. So the lady at the grocery store also said some nonsensical statement about Biden murdering people, no clue what she was talking about. Well, look, we saw that before with Hillary. Right-wing propaganda channels do tell people all kinds of nonsense. And do we hold people accountable for believing what they consume? It's kind of like a war tactic. War is being waged against America by international and domestic enemies, and some people's brains are casualties of that war. Some people consume media that is well-funded, that is pervasive, that is available on their Facebook, that's available on news channels they frequent, and it's psychological warfare in many instances because it's designed to make them feel special and good. They use language targeted to make people feel like they can cut through nonsense taught to them by mainstream media. And I've got many bones to pick with mainstream media, It's got a lot of subtle propaganda worked in through minimization and exclusion of emphasis that is necessary for democracy preservation, is necessary to help people become informed citizens. Information on Donald Trump's pattern of criminality, pattern of selling out the United States for pocket change, or whatever constitutes pocket change to him. I did see a good video from Mark Cuban. Let's see. He made this speech in 2016, and I'm going to share it because it's such a potent series of questions to ask from people now.
There's going to come a time if Donald Trump, God help us, was president, or a Putin or an Assad would say to him, Donald, if you do this, I'll give you $20 billion. What's 20 billion to them? What's 30 billion? For them, that's nothing. If Donald Trump, who rips off people for thousands, gets offered by some dictator somewhere, some despot somewhere, $20 billion, you think he's going to do what's right for the country? Or do you think he's going to take the money? Do you think he's got the temperament to do the right thing? Do you think he's got the fortitude to do the right thing? Do you think he cares more about you or his bank account? Can you trust Donald Trump? Absolutely not.
All right, so those were some good questions. Should you trust Donald Trump? And the answer for that crowd very clearly was no. Who are the people who still trust Donald Trump? I had so many negative emotions hearing someone disclose that their granddaughter had a tutor for school, and the granddaughter asked the tutor, who are you going to vote for? And she said Trump for gas prices and oil prices. And the thing is, inflation has come down, and inflation is a worldwide problem. Inflation is also a consequence of what happened when Trump was in office, which is that he started a whole bunch of trade wars with American trading partners in order to make press statements about what a strong, commanding daddy figure he was. Like, look at me, I'm telling China no. What was he really doing? He was looking at the fallout of that trade war that he started and falsely described as being easy to win. He said trade wars are good and easy to win. I'm literally quoting from a Donald Trump tweet in, I think, about 2017. Actually, I should Google when he said it. Let's have a look. Because these things get reported on, but minimally because of media complicity to Republican interests. And why would that be? Maybe Republican donating uber wealthy media moguls like to have Trump Republican tax cuts and Trump Republican reduction in corporate tax rates, and subsidies for private jets. Maybe the media moguls who own the consolidated different media companies that shape much of the media landscape have an interest in reporting the news as accurately as they can, but still minimizing negative stories that would impact people's view of Trump if they had enough exposure to it. So maybe you can go on about a Trump tweet, but you don't go on about, you don't explain to the public what a Trump tariff is or what a tariff is and why Trump is wrong saying that trade wars are good and easy to win. Trade wars are good and easy to win. Okay, good. It was 2018. I found a story on it. So I can share that, which will be good because it's important to share proof with people. I mean, we on the left often want to talk our value system and say Trump is racist. Yes, it's true. And the racism is extremely consequential and destructive. But we also have to talk to people where they are. And where they are is they believe that Trump is good economically and he's terrible economically. If they can't look at Trump's multiple bankruptcies as evidence because their brains are dominated by the memory of Trump, positive Trump associations from The Apprentice, where producers helped him fabricate the impression of a successful, wealthy person. He's bad at business. He's just good at self-marketing. Here we go. So here, this is a very important quote where Trump doubles down, trade wars are good and easy to win. Really, anybody who professes to be a Trump supporter should realize the damage that he did to America's agricultural sector and America's manufacturing sector by starting wars in which he imposes tariffs on another nation and they reciprocally set tariffs as well. So he imposed tariffs on steel. See, look at the overly simplified BS of this statement. When a country, USA, is losing many billions of dollars on trade with virtually every country it does business with, trade wars are good and easy to win. So he's being overly negative about the US economy because that's how he's found success. It's been rewarding for him just trying to put other people down in the way that if you only have a media that just superficially blathers at you and you infantilize people so that they just look to other people to put people down as a show of strength. If you just make fun of people and you try to win at that game instead of winning at sounding invested in doing good. And look, I'm personally relieved that the Trump-Harris campaign is fighting fire a little bit with fire, that they are sassing Donald Trump rather than trying to just be the serious mom in the room, as opposed to the deadbeat dad that makes big promises about taking all the kids to Disneyland and then doesn't turn up. But the kids are still like, no, we love dad. We rarely see him, but he never tells us to go to bed or brush our teeth. He's just amazing and magic. And of course, he's our favorite parent. It's a very destructive approach to have. I've got to make sure I slow down sometimes. Here we go. So we're reading this article. Trump wars are good and easy to win. Oh, there's a video. There's a video here. Oh, the video file cannot be played. When people say the internet is forever, it's really not, because nobody can be bothered keeping everything forever. Now, error code 232, blah, 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 meaning basically it's a few years old, so they're not preserving the evidence of Trump saying that trade wars are good and easy to win, but at least you can see the picture. So he definitely did do that. Mongolia was meant to arrest Russia's President Putin last night. It didn't, and now it's in trouble. Well, it would have been hard to believe that Putin would get arrested. The dude is a multi-millionaire not multi-millionaire. He's a multi-billionaire. He's likely the world's wealthiest man. His closest friends and relatives serve as his wallets in that he dumps billions of dollars into their accounts as well. So he can call on anybody he likes without having to account to the Russian people for all the money he's stolen from them. Oh, the Dow is down a little bit. And Putin's making noises about nuclear weapons, which it tends to do when it's losing in Ukraine and it starts to be like, yeah, but maybe we'll bomb people. All right, let's see what Bob said. Off subject, I was wondering, a lot of times a reporter will include a politician's education. They went to Yale or Harvard. Are these Ivy League school classes harder than other colleges? I didn't go to college, but both my daughters did, and they're both so much smarter than some of our elected officials. At least that's what it seems like to me. Well, Bob, I've never been to Yale or Harvard, so I can't tell you if the classes are harder. There's definitely a lot of prestige associated with attending an Ivy League university. I bet the classes are a little bit harder. I mean, maybe that's just my normalcy bias, wanting to believe that there's something behind all the puff and braggadocio of the Ivy League prestige. But I think a lot of elected officials appear stupid on purpose because what you hear from them is simplistic propaganda, targeted to reach the lowest common denominator, targeted towards people with less education, because if you have less education, maybe you're more easily persuaded to believe lies. I'm not saying this about you, Bob, because even though you've had so many obstacles to overcome, you're willing to pay attention and you're sufficiently a humble enough person that you don't just automatically denigrate people in authority and people with, say, a healthcare background, etc. Some people have such a chip on their shoulder from their negative educational experience that they're willing to do anything to believe that they're secretly the smartest and that their QAnon wisdom has conferred on them this insight that that doctors and the educational elite are too stupid to get. So election officials, elected politicians you hear that sound dumb are not necessarily that dumb, but they have very simple talking points to repeat over and over. And they also are often put in a position of defending the indefensible. So Republicans who defend Trump and Republican policies are trying to pretend that government is inherently bad, whereas really the point of government is to have rule of the people in the interests of the people by elected people. But just at this particular point in history, Republican politicians are lobbyists for vested interests of the uber wealthy. And so they have to lie, and they have to keep their lies simple. They have to keep their lies easily repeatable. They have to keep their lies readily digestible, like you'd have chicken soup if you were ill, something simple, maybe some porridge. It's pap to be most persuasive as propaganda. And you're going to sound stupid trying to defend Trump and pretend that you haven't seen his tweets, that you don't know that he regularly spouts violence inciting vitriol against the Democrats, against Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and even Republican politicians and elected officials who are in his way. Like the governor of Georgia, Brian Kemp, who didn't support Trump's efforts to overturn the election to Trump's satisfaction. So he denigrates him at his rallies. And Governor Kemp is going to sound stupid trying to defend Donald Trump, but at the same time, he has no choice. He's the governor of Georgia still, and there are enough rabid Republicans there that he and his family are literally exposing themselves to danger if they contradict Donald Trump too much, or to a level that they think will trigger Trump to criticize them more. Because Trump's criticisms are not just criticisms, they are triggers for an unleashing of his stochastic terrorism tendencies. And stochastic terrorism is terrorism that's outsourced to unknown other people. You just keep saying long enough, oh, the other people have a terrible, you lie about them and say they kill babies. You misrepresent palliative care for babies, terminally ill babies that are born with hours or days to live and that get pain relieving treatment from doctors in the moments leading up to their death. And he misrepresents that as babies that are executed after being born. You do all of those things to rage bait and arouse people to irrationally violent levels of hysteria, so that you are increasing the likelihood that somebody will act out. So if he says Brian Kemp is against us, people are disassociated from reality to the extent that one crazy person out of a million people who hear Donald Trump's speech may literally then track down Brian Kemp's family and hurt him or members of his family. So, yes. Bob says he put up his vote for Harris sign, but has to take it in at night because the last election, 3 Biden signs were stolen. Yes, and it's very frustrating, I would imagine, to invest your money in signs and then have those products be stolen. It's theft, and it's a type of terrorism as well. They're trying to deter people from openly expressing their support for Donald Trump. Donald Trump encourages that by, again, framing the Democrats not just as political opponents, but as enemies. So people might literally think that their theft is just an expression of patriotism because they are, supporting the only person who puts America first. Because that language, that very absolutist, reality-bending language, language that ignores that Trump put the country last when there was a pandemic. Trump put the country last when he kissed up to the Chinese president, President Xi, in order to try and undo or hide some of the harm he'd caused America's manufacturing sector by signing a new trade deal with China in January 2020. So Trump kissed up to President Xi and said he was doing a great job of COVID. He wasn't. Said that he was doing a great job of handling it, and so it wouldn't spread to the United States and nobody had anything to worry about. And we've heard Trump's voice tell Bob Woodward, I didn't want to be a I wanted to be a cheerleader, so I didn't want to tell people the risks. He said to Bob Woodward in February that, yes, he knew the disease didn't just affect older people. He knew that the disease could be spread through the air. He knew that it was a serious problem, but he didn't want to be the bringer of bad news. He wanted to be a cheerleader. Yay, everything's wrong. He was the commander-in-chief, and it was up to him to alert people to adopt risk mitigating behaviors, the kind of to promote the kind of uniformity you need under a pandemic, to have the kind of universal adoption of safe practices that, in order to benefit people, need to be done to a maximal level. And Trump instead tried to benefit from making it a point of contention, trying to make it that it was a conspiracy, that Democrats were conducting a hoax by warning about a pandemic, that it wasn't real, that it would go away, that it would fade with by April or by Easter or the hot weather, and that he was the only champion of economic functioning. That kind of hand waving away of a real festering, exponentially growing problem was what caused then recession activity, recessionary economic conditions, and caused the deaths. The Brookings Institute calculated that Trump was responsible for approximately 70% of COVID deaths. So in official figures, around the 700,000 deaths mark, but unofficially much higher, because of course, not all COVID deaths, like things like a heart attack or a stroke following COVID, go underreported as COVID deaths. So when you died quickly during COVID of COVID-induced pneumonia and breathing difficulties, then that could get marked as a COVID death. But we know more now. I mean, some people knew more then, but it wasn't always widely accepted that COVID affected clotting properties of the blood, that caused microclotting, that made strokes and heart attacks more likely, and that a lot of deaths subsequent to an instance of COVID, a case of COVID, was related to that. And Trump's national testing strategy team that was coordinated by Jared Kushner, they abandoned their efforts to have a national testing strategy because, as the whistleblower said to a Vanity Fair journalist anonymously, but very plausibly, that it was abandoned because Trump was thinking it was more politically expedient to be able to blame blue state governors and then say that that COVID was just their problem. So he didn't want to have a national testing strategy. He didn't want to have a national response. He wanted to let people suffer. He wanted to pit state against state in terms of who got what shipment of protective gear, or who got what shipment of ventilators, or who got resources and testing things. He made it a contest of which governors could curry favor with him best, and did so to hurt people from states that had a majority of votes against him, and did so through a lens of benefit to himself and his future as a Republican candidate running for office again. So yes. All right. So we looked at trade. Trump saying trade wars are good and easy to win. Have we looked at Trump's manufacturing recession? Not yet. I really want more white people to know about it. Peter Buttigieg. Oops, I said Trump's manufacturing and I forgot the recession. Oh, look. Coal production declined 26.5%, and coal mining jobs dropped by 25%. Handgun production rose 12.5%. Yes. Oh, there's a Politico article that says Trump hails manufacturing miracle as factories bleed jobs. My father is Australian, lives in Australia, and he's still under the impression that manufacturing has done worse under the Biden-Harris administration, because this is the pervasiveness of economic propaganda, pro-Republican economic falsities. I'm just looking to see if this Politico story, I think it's It's an episode or something rather than but I can still share the headline. All right, let's see. Yes, long COVID may cause early onset dementia. There's all sorts of things, and Trump really hampered our ability to contain that, and then left Biden with this problem of trying to put an escaped thing back in a box. Trump hails manufacturing miracle as factories bleed jobs. The president's anti-trade agenda and a pandemic-induced recession have combined to shutter factories and accelerate trend towards automation. Yeah, that's okay, but I want to find a better story, because there are stories on the manufacturing recession that happened before COVID was known about. So reporting from October 2019. So we'll get that up on screen. Does it sound loud when I type? Okay, good. We've got an LA Times article. I'm familiar with this one. I'll share it. And then we'll make it bigger. So if we look at the timeline that this was published, Trump no thank you, LA Times. Manufacturing is now officially in recession despite Trump's vow to boost industry. This dude is an empty blob of promises. Very, very typically fascist. Oh yes, I'm going to fix everything. Poor on delivery. He's just reassuring at an emotional level for white people who want to believe, if they hear enough propaganda that Republicans are good for industry and manufacturing and the economy, they want to believe it's true. The big promises are not only empty, the opposite is true. Trump caused a recession. Let's have a look at why this is. This article has some description of some causative factors. It's published October the 11th, 2019, and he writes, Donnelly writes, during President Trump's first 2 years in office, his standing with many voters was buoyed by a surge in manufacturing that helped create millions of jobs and undergirded the whole US economy. But today, manufacturing has plunged into recession and is threatening to pull down other sectors, perhaps hitting hardest on supporters in those states that helped put Trump in office. Impeachment may be dominating the news, but the less noticed industrial slump ultimately could pose a greater threat to Trump's re-election. And Trump knew this. Trump definitely knew that the manufacturing recession could cause some of those those blue-collar, white non-college educated voters to think twice about buying his BS about being capable of turning things around for their towns, their jobs, their families, their communities. And that's why he tried so hard to make a deal with China. And he did. He signed a trade agreement with China in January 2020. But the cost to the American public of that deal, the conditions that Trump then created to as part of his need to curry favor with President Xi at that critical time, for him personally wanting to hide evidence of the manufacturing recession under the flashy public announcement of a new trade deal with China. It's one of the motivating factors for him lying about COVID at the point where COVID's introduction to America was still small, was still containable. This was the critical time for Trump to do something about COVID, and he was more concerned with hiding the outcome of his trade war. And to me, that's really important that people know that there's this link between him needing to hide economic failure, the empty, hollow nature of his promises to middle America, that his incompetence in one area created him to then be purposefully incompetent in another area. So let's have a look. As measured by the Federal Reserve, manufacturing output shrank over 2 straight quarters this year. That's the common definition of recession. A separate, widely followed index drawn from purchasing managers showed September's contraction in manufacturing was the steepest since June 2009, with production, inventories, and new orders all falling. And after adding nearly 500,000 jobs in the prior 2 years, which Trump frequently stressed in hard hat rallies throughout the Midwest, manufacturing employment has stalled. Instead of healthy job growth, layoff announcements have surged this year, especially in battleground states such as Pennsylvania and Michigan. And in the context, sorry, pull away from the article, in the context of the Electoral College system, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, those 80,000 votes in those 3 states gave Trump the Electoral College victory that won him the election in 2016. He lost the popular vote by close to 3 million votes, but he understands the slave industry pandering that feature of the Constitution that is the Electoral College, that gave smaller agriculturally based states that weren't industrialized, states where the landowners that were in office wouldn't consent to signing on to the Constitution unless they had some conciliatory measures written out for them. And the conciliatory measure was the Electoral College system will give your states more heft. And people who bought the propaganda when they went to school that the Electoral College system is just to help the little guys, the little states. The little states are little states. Demographically, they're smaller. They were filled with wealthy people who didn't want to surrender the power that they had to derive extraordinary wealth from the exploitation of slaves, from the exploitation of enslaved people, because these were human beings that some people had grown little carapaces of justification. You know, a carapace, it's a shell that some insects have. They grew these crusted on religious-based and logic-based shells to justify their immoral activities and their immoral profiteering from the denial of humanity, Black humanity, which is a lie, because Black people are humans, and it is a wicked behavior to enslave them and profit from their slavery, from the enslavement of their family, from family separation, and from the indignity of taking away people's freedom and self-determination. So the Electoral College system is a fallout from the rationalizations, the calcified rationalizations around the practice of enrichment through slavery. All right, how long have I been talking for? 51 minutes. Is that too much, everybody? I think it is, because I can feel my voice getting a little hoarse. I'm going to say unions are good, and they are not universally good, because sometimes unions can contain corrupt people. But the efficient practice of unions is good, because wealthy people can invest in industry and they can purchase equipment and expand a business more easily. So yay, points for them for job creation, but that power needs to be offset by the less powered by money, the disempowered people finding a way to at least use their numeric advantage. There are more workers than there are people who own the equipment to not institute communism. Communism is bad as a system of government, but unions are good as a system of making Voltron out of workers, making people able to build on each other to develop some collective bargaining power and therefore create rights such as reasonable working conditions and having occupational health and safety standards and weekends and the ability to have downtime, have sleep, have enough time to help your children with their homework, etc. The ability to not only live, but live in a way that creates space for you to be more, a space for you to thrive and for your family to thrive. And that is fair and an outcome associated with good functional societies, not dog-eat-dog dysfunctional societies. And those societies are more common in Republican governed states, in areas where Medicaid expansion has been opposed. School lunch expansion, holiday food programs are closed because they won't accept federal funds out of principle. What is that principle? The sadistic principle of saying God blesses the worthy, and if you don't have enough money to feed your children, then you must be inherently bad, and government shouldn't help you. Government shouldn't exist to help you. Government should only exist to protect the property of the wealthy, and to have a military to protect the property of the wealthy from external incursion, as well as potentially domestic theft. They only want to have government as a method of protecting wealthy advantage and the advantage of the wealthy to be able to exploit and create desperate conditions in order to make people even more exploitable and squeeze fines and rental payments out of people who deserve to be able to buy a fridge and to have a minimum working wage that allows them to sleep with a roof over their heads comfortably. Not to have 3 Lamborghinis, not to have everybody have exactly equally the same amount of everything, but to not oppress the working class, to not make the working class desperate and exploitable. So I hope that made sense. I hope people have enjoyed the broadcast today. Let me close down that thing and just very quickly see if I have any speeches left that I saved to share. I shared the Mark Cuban speech. Oh, I will share one last point from an account by somebody called Kurt. He's a journalist, and he dug up something important, which was Donald Trump previously noted the election was a fraud. Voting machines switched votes. Voters should march on the Capitol in protest. 2012, Donald Trump, when the candidate he endorsed, Mitt Romney, lost the election. Oops. Here we go. So these are saved tweets. He always does this when he loses. He always makes an effort to shape reality by insisting he has the moral high ground. So can we see that? I'll make it bigger and read it. Our country is now in serious and unprecedented trouble like never before. This election is a total sham and a travesty. We are not a democracy. More votes equals a loss. Revolution. Let's fight like hell and stop this great and disgusting injustice. The world is laughing at us. He knows the language of grievance. And if people don't know, Donald Trump's first wife said in a divorce deposition that he kept a book of Hitler's collected speeches, My New Order, in his bedside cabinet and read it frequently. It's a lie that Donald Trump can't read. He can read, and he read Hitler's speeches, and you can hear echoes of it in his rhetoric against migrants when he says they're poisoning the blood of our country, when he repeats language that was used by Hitler to denigrate and vilify a minority group that was more easily denigrated then, and that was Jewish people. Jewish people in Germany, and Trump appropriated those tactics to denigrate and vilify migrants, undocumented migrants in this country, people who have circumvented the refugee system, or the system of applying for refugee status, just because it's been, through Republican obstructionism, so deprived of resources. The immigration courts have been so clogged up through lack of judges, federal resources to help facilitate that process, because America is enriched by the fact that, for reasons good and bad, it has been a magnet to migrants. So the bad reasons, or the sad reasons, are climate change, messing with the agriculture of other countries that are people that are more vulnerable to changes in output, because some of them have been very severe with temperature changes, and gang activities, some of which have occurred in leadership vacuums following CIA efforts to depose democratically elected governments in other countries, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I can understand the fears of communism taking over and having a domino effect, but the truth is that it's debatable the wisdom of some of those efforts of US agencies to preserve or to help defend countries against communism, because sometimes the chaos created. Anyway, look, it's not for me to be able to exercise a deity level of insight and judgment. And also, it's not my area of study. I can admit very easily to not knowing enough about those things. So I will just say that I know very profoundly and personally that communism is a bad system for governing a country, because it facilitates despotic behavior by centralized people with insufficient checks and balances, and that then the activities of business and industry are impaired. People get ration cards. There's frequently starvation and scarcity issues in countries that have succumbed to communism, and that I myself was in a communist country just touring with my parents when I was 7. We visited Poland, and I contracted appendicitis and had to stay in a communist hospital, which was not good. And we also ate dinner with people who proudly told us that they'd saved up their meat rations for a month in order to give us that feast. And we then stopped putting food on our plate and started to put the meat back into the tray. Like, oh my God, we were eating their month's supply of meat by saying, wow, this looks delicious, and heaping our plates. We tried to unheap our plates when we realized what they had done. And that's because, yes, the ration cards, the bread lines, the queues associated with communism are bad. And it's nothing to do with the policy of Democrats to not artificially promise equality for everybody, but to deliver enhanced opportunities for the citizens of a great nation, where the prosperity is real but should not be withheld from people, that the lower echelons of America's socioeconomic system should not be squeezed and kept at untenable minimum wages that don't allow them to maintain a home over their head, that force them to go into debt, or to you shouldn't have working poor. People who have jobs should not have to live in their cars to survive, should not be forced to have so many jobs they can't see their children or spend time helping them with their homework, or even be emotionally invested in their children's educational achievements, because it does take time and effort to care about, to invest, to read with your children, and to talk to them, to help them develop an adult vocabulary as they grow up. These are all things that take time and take a degree of financial ease to achieve. And citizens in other countries can have that, and that should be the birthright of people who live in America as well, because it has the resources to have a universally happy and well looked after citizenry. You don't have to eliminate free market capitalism in order to do so. You just have to have solidly regulated capitalism with appropriate corporate tax rates that allow for infrastructure to not only be created, but to be maintained and expanded in a way that benefits its citizens. So thanks to everybody who tuned in today. Take care of yourselves. Make sure you check your voter registration status, and to tell other people to do so, because Republican governors and people in office with bad intentions have been indiscriminately purged. Well, I won't say indiscriminately. It's quite discriminatory, actually. A lot of Democratic voters have reported being purged from voting rolls, even rolls where they've been active, they haven't moved, etc. They've just been taken off voter rolls, and the process of re-registering yourself to vote is time consuming, and it's a policy that's being practiced in order to deter Democratic voters and to suppress the Democratic vote. So you can combat that by telling people, you might have been accidentally taken off the roll. It's happening a lot in some places. Please make sure. So particularly in battleground states, if there are Republicans in office or Republicans as Secretary of State, please consider that these unethical tactics have been deployed, and there's multiple anecdotes of this happening at scale. And the Republicans will boast of how many people they've removed from the voting rolls, and they'll claim that they did so with justification. But yes, Bob still thinks I should do TikTok. I agree, Bob. I agree. And I thought I might do a cooking show on TikTok as well, and just weave political stuff into the cooking show. What do you think about that? Is that too crazy, Bob? Should you just do a cooking show if you want to do a cooking show, or politics if you want to do politics? I just like cooking, and I'm not always the best at it. So I thought that was kind of had comedy to it as well. I was like going to do incompetent cooking with some politics. Anyway, I welcome anybody's feedback, as always, as to how best deliver or how to best progress towards my goal, which is just to amplify important factual points. The incompetence of Republican economic policies, and this is historically predating Trump, but the pervasiveness of recessions that have commenced under Republican presidents in office, because that pattern that people are succumbing to of not realizing there's a time delay in political outcomes, that Republicans institute bad policies and Democrats not only have to clean up after it, but institute very growth-orientated measures in order to turn things around, and then they're rewarded for it by people getting complacent and allowing Republicans to get back into office when they should not be allowed in office in their current formation after what they have done over and over again to the American people. Sabotaged community health measures, sabotaged the expansion of Medicaid, sabotaged job creation, sabotaged workers' rights, so many things, sabotaged economic growth because hurt workers spend less money. Bob says, I think you can do both. You should also look for short clips from some of your talks and put them on. This is a good point. These are all very good points, Bob. And this StreamYard service actually does now have the ability to let people clip things. So, let me work on that. There's not much time to the election. So, okay, let me go write a plan. Thank you to anybody who tuned in today. I'm going to go drink some water. It's been great. Check your voter registration, vote down ballot. Democrats have greater attrition of down ballot voting than Republicans for reasons I tried to speculate about. It's not always useful to try and inform MAGA Republicans because they have this calcified carapace of rationalizations that they now believe that excuse Trump from accountability because they've become so emotionally invested in that bully. But Tim Walz has the right approach. To call them out as bullies and weirdos is a powerful pin to disinflate a MAGA balloon for those who still have the capacity to wake up and smell the reality of a adjudicated rapist, convicted fraudster, misguided trade war starter, disrespecter of the troops, economically misguided, America ruining a-hole who already gave Americans 4 years of chaos and destabilizing rhetoric that did incite violence, did cause families to experience so much rupture and conflict because Pied Piper led people away from reality. And the further away you dance merrily from reality, the greater conflicts that arise with the people who don't just believe a liar and who therefore have a more secure relationship with reality. It makes it harder to have people in your family who have been danced merrily away down a path of deception by a skilled con artist who says anything, who has studied Hitler and his ability to whip people up into a misguided frenzy. And that misguided frenzy still is so tolerable for too many Americans who are used to taking a cue from the media to blame Democrats for any adverse economic conditions and misguidedly credit Republicans. And that is a function of complicity at a magnate level of ownership. It's disgusting. And the antidote to it is people speaking out, is white people to tell other white people, hey, I know it's easier to believe the impression that you get from the media, that Republicans are telling the truth when they say they're competent economic managers. They aren't. I encourage people to invite their friends and neighbors to question if it's true that Republicans are competent economic managers, because Trump started a trade war that harmed farmers, that harmed manufacturers, that harmed truck drivers employed in the transport sector, because transport is an adjacent industry to manufacturing. When you're making less things, you're transporting less things. It harmed people's jobs in the storage industry, because when you're not making things, you're not storing them, you're not transporting them and storing them somewhere else. All of these industries, all of these sectors lost jobs. When Trump was in office in 2019, there was a recession at that time, and it leads into Trump's misbehavior and active sabotage of public health, leading to deaths. So Trump's behavior led to job losses. Trump's behavior led to deaths. I should write a summary of this and put it on TikTok, because I know lots of people listen to TikTok. Spread the word that I'm still on the Twitter, though. If people want to follow someone who does regular live stream broadcasts, I'm so motivated to broadcast regularly right now. This election is so critical. We cannot let a deadly, democide inciting, insurrectionist, adjudicated rapist, convicted fraudster back in the office again, just out of the complacency of enough white voters in swing states. We cannot let that happen. Lean into the joy, lean into the enthusiasm, share the truth about how good the Biden-Harris administration has been to steer the American economy through the rocky waters of an environment where Putin started a war with Ukraine, supply chains were sabotaged because of the extent to which COVID was an international problem for countries and for supply routes. All of these things. Let's make a short list of talking points and help to circulate them. That's my goal. Take care, everybody. Thank you, Bob, for your good suggestions. Bye.